Greetings, one and all. Welcome to the live stream, Gordon Causey. And I have to apologize once again. I'm an hour later than I originally intended for this video to be. I had scheduled it to start at 9:45, and welcome to my life. I had dinner tonight. We watched a little bit of The Chosen, the streaming show on the life of Jesus from the gospel accounts. And then I napped out, intending for it to be an hour or so long nap, and I stayed down a little longer than I intended. I see I've had Max and Monarchy, Danny, and of course Candy's here too. And if I don't give Candy her treat, I get no peace. So lay down. Speak. 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 She's not barking like she does most of the time. Let's clear away some space in front of my laptop. Oh, you guys are amazing. Yeah, Danny had written that, giving me the benefit of the doubt. Hope you meant 22:45 as opposed to 21:45. No, I know my 24-hour clock used to be in the Army. I know the time. I just crashed out and unfortunately didn't wake up in time. I didn't set an alarm. I said I'll take a quick nap. The joys of getting older. And so let's see. They've been talking about Alex Jones Station. There's been conversation centered around Alex Jones Station, InfoWars, which is something I used to watch him when it was Prison Planet, and I became aware of who Alex Jones is back in around the 9/11 era, after the 2001 September 11th, everything that happened on that day. And I started to frequent a site called What Really Happened, because so much that was being reported in the mainstream media just way back then, 25 years ago, almost 25 years ago, did not make sense, did not add up. There was so much insanity going on at that time. And I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole right now of all the question marks about the official version of what happened on 9/11. On September 11th, 2001. There's so many holes in that story, or questions, just what I consider to be unanswered questions. But Danny's read both of, apparently Alex Jones has a couple of books, and he considers them great reads. I've heard suggestions that Alex Jones is controlled opposition, that he puts information out there that's meant to test the reaction. How will people react when they find out this? Or as a way to discredit things, because Alex Jones is certainly a very bombastic individual. What I'm going to suggest is that anyone talking about Alex Jones, there's a large swath of the population that if you bring up InfoWars, Prison Planet, Alex Jones, they immediately start fashioning you with a tinfoil hat, and you'll be regarded as someone not worthy to have an opinion even. It's a crazy world we live in. I personally, my preference is to divorce personalities from the ideas being put forth. I like to just look at simply the ideas, and then to mull over the ideas and leave the personalities aside. Is it a good idea? Okay. And I have Danny saying that Alex blew it wide open. Referring to it as the 9/11 con job. I could do a whole video talking about all the questions I had about the events on that day, but I've done it before. I've done one a while ago, maybe on the anniversary of 9/11. I'll talk about what I was doing that day, working in downtown Toronto for a tech firm, and the immediate questions that came flooding to my mind. The biggest one, of course, was building number 7, World Trade Center building number 7. I think it was 45 stories high, a rectangular shaped building, never hit by a plane or anything, and it simply imploded on itself perfectly. It looked like a textbook example of a planned demolition. And I watched it. I think it was that evening we were glued to the TV set in my household, and I watched it. And I believe I was watching it actually live. And what the heck? A building just doesn't collapse in on itself because of fire. No steel frame building in history before 9/11 or after. No steel frame building has ever simply just collapsed in on itself because of a fire. But again, that's a side point, or that's a side issue, because we've got big news happening now in Canada. Of course, we have our election coming up April 28th, and I want to provide 7 what I'll call talking points when we're talking to our friends or family, work colleagues, neighbors, conversations that we have every single day. And you are going to meet a lot of people who are supportive of the Liberals, and you won't know they're supportive of the Liberals unless you actually get into conversation. And there are a lot of people, and I've said this many times before, who get their marching orders from the mainstream media, from CBC, CTV, Global, whatever they are programmed to think, to believe. The media tells them how to feel about things. They tell them to trust Mark Carney. They tell them that over and over that Mark Carney has a wealth of experience in financial markets in the financial sector. We're facing tough economic times. We have been for the last 10 years. There are always tough economic times. And so there are a lot of people, and they won't divulge it necessarily unless you draw it out of them. You have to get into conversations. You have to talk about these things. And I have 7, and I can probably add to the list as we go, 7 what I'm calling talking points, things that you can bring up. And maybe not all of them will resonate. Maybe not all of them will land, but if you have 7 or more, chances are at least something is going to resonate and cause someone to question their support for Mark Carney and the Liberal Party of Canada. I'm just going to catch up on what's being said in the live chat. Rhett Skinner is challenging me, or I guess anyone, to watch Cory Booker's marathon speech that he did today. If I'm not mistaken, there's a member of the U.S. Senate, a member of the Democratic Party, who has been filibustering, who has been maintaining the floor of the U.S. Senate for, I think it was in and around 20, maybe even 24, maybe 24 hours plus, enumerating all of his misgivings, or all his the negative things in his opinion about the Trump administration. And I would assume that the purpose of this Cory individual, if I have that right, the purpose of his filibuster was to delay the business of the U.S. Senate. And we've seen, we have, within the Canadian context, you rarely, if ever, hear about a filibuster, but there are parliamentary tactics that are used when the opposition wants to stall the government from implementing certain legislation. There are certain tactics they can employ to try and delay and obstruct the government. And as I understand it, that's what a filibuster is for. I need to know if I got it right. Is that who Cory Booker's? That's the only thing that comes to mind when you mention a marathon. Um, Danny is saying that, getting back to building 7, and to crash a building like that in a perfectly planned demolition, that you need weeks to wire and to set the explosives, and you have to pour over that kind of demolition requires a lot of planning. If that was indeed a planned demolition, building 7, which I believe it was, well, then you would have to plan something like that out weeks in advance. Danny's writing, unfortunately, my mom is a good little sheeple. Dad and I are black sheep conservatives. Well, I could make a pejorative, sweeping comment that will get me labeled a sexist. So what the heck? I'm going to make it. A lot of women base their decisions on emotion. Not all, but a lot of women base their decisions on emotion. And if you can trigger a person emotionally, male or female, well, then they're much easier to manipulate, much easier to control. If you can trigger fear, if you can trigger the maternal instinct to care, to care, to care, I care, if you can lead fake emotion like Trudeau did so well for some, it worked on a lot of people, is we really care about transgender children. We have to affirm their identity or they might harm themselves. And if that means double mastectomies and castrations and mutilating healthy young bodies, well, then that's what we have to do. And we're doing it because we care. And there are people who fall for that type of manipulative game. And Trudeau and Brett, apparently, yes, I did get it right with the individual, the US Senator filibustering on the floor of the Senate. And Danny's giving us the definition: an action such as prolonged speech that obstructs progress in a legislative assembly while not technically contravening the required procedures. And then Danny adding in finally, Jesus is king. And amen, brother. Yes, Jesus is king. That's the biggest problem we have in the world right now, is that we have pulled up the anchor of our Judeo-Christian roots and are just letting our ship of state in Canada and the United States and most of the Western world, we pulled up anchor, that the anchor that is our Judeo-Christian grounding. We pulled it up and now we're drifting on the sea. We're going whichever way. We're so easy to manipulate now as compared to what society was like in previous eras. Now, how do we take down Mark Carney? And I'm going here are the talking points that I'm going to suggest. And I've mentioned many of them before. There's a new one though on the list. I'll make it number one, and that is this individual, Paul Chiang. Paul Chiang is or rather was the candidate for Markham Unionville, which most will know is has a very high percentage. A lot of Chinese immigrants have come in, and it's a very Chinese area of Toronto to the north and east of Toronto. Markham Unionville, Markham Stouffville area. It's somewhat the new Chinatown, if you will. Chinatown used to be an area down around Dundas West, down in the city of Toronto, but the city of Markham has become a flashpoint. That's where a lot of recent immigrants from China have gravitated toward. They've gravitated toward areas like Markham, areas like Richmond in British Columbia. There's a tendency when immigrant populations come into Canada, and this has been going on for all of our history, they tend to gravitate to certain geographical areas. We had Cabbage Town down in Toronto for the Irish immigrants. We had Pape and Danforth for Greek immigrants. We had St. Clair, young St. Clair area for, I believe that was Little Italy. Portugal was more Rogers Road out in the West End. You have these areas where immigrant communities quite often will cluster. And the reason individuals do that is for comfort. When you're coming into a new country, it's nice to be surrounded by people who speak the same language and have the same cultural touch points that you do. And so whether it's been Chinese or German or Greek or Italian or whatever the case, there's a tendency to do that. And that's a big sidetrack. But Paul Chiang was, past tense of the verb, the Liberal candidate for this riding of Markham Unionville. And what Paul Chiang was advocating back in January, he was speaking to a Chinese media press conference, and he was advocating that a conservative candidate in this election, a gentleman by the name of Joe Kay, if memory serves. I don't have the articles in front of me at this moment, but a conservative candidate, I believe the name was Joe Tay, that he be kidnapped and taken to the Chinese consulate where an individual or individuals would be able to collect a bounty. The um, Hong Kong police, under the direction of Beijing, China, have put a bounty on Joe Tay's head. It total value $184,000 roughly in Canadian dollars. So if you could kidnap this guy, take him to the Chinese consulate, you got $184,000. And Paul Chang, liberal candidate under Mark Carney's Liberals, was advocating, hey, here's a chance to get 184 grand. Go kidnap this guy, take him to the Chinese consulate, and ka-ching, ka-ching, $184,000. That's disgusting that a Canadian parliamentarian, because this Paul Chang sits in Parliament, he's a sitting member of Carney's government, was advocating to kidnap a Canadian citizen and a political opponent and to hand him over to a foreign country. And that's bad enough. That's bad enough. But Mark Carney, you'd think it would be an easy decision. He is no longer a candidate for our party. He does not represent the values that the Liberal Party of Canada puts forward. No, Mark Carney stood by this guy. He said the comments were regrettable, but this is a teachable moment. I'm going to teach this 64-year-old former Toronto police officer that in Canada, we don't advocate for the kidnapping of our political opponents and handing them over to foreign nations, especially a nation like China, which is famous for human rights abuses. But Mark Carney didn't do that. He did not immediately kick Paul Chang out of the party or anything. Remember, Jody Wilson-Raybould was kicked out of the Liberal Party by Justin Trudeau for refusing to give in to pressure to give a sweetheart deal to his corporate buddies. But Mark Carney would not kick out Paul Chang. Now, thankfully, Paul Chang at least recognized the heinous nature of his actions, and he has since subsequently withdrawn from the race of his own volition. Mark Carney wouldn't do it. Mark Carney wouldn't kick him out, but Paul Chang, on his own volition, said, "Hey, okay, I'm gone." So he's out of the party. Now let's compare that to how the Conservatives reacted when it was found that one of their candidates in a podcast interview show that went back 2 or 3 years, something that's no longer on the internet, by the way. There's a conservative candidate who jokingly did it's a comedy podcast he was on that was joking about bringing back in the death penalty. And he was joking that Justin Trudeau should be subject to the death penalty. From all reports, it was joking, lighthearted, ha ha, but that kind of thing is not funny. You do not advocate that, just like you don't advocate that a political opponent be kidnapped and handed over to a foreign country. You also don't advocate, even jokingly, that a political opponent be subject to the death penalty. And the Conservative Party dropped that candidate immediately. There will be 343 Liberal candidates. There will be 343 Conservative candidates. There are going to be unfortunate individuals who end up on the ballot in any number of ridings. The question is, how do the party leaders how do they deal with it when something comes up, when you got a Paul Chang advocating that a member of an opposing party, Paul Chang advocating that this Joe Tay be kidnapped and handed over to a foreign country. How do you deal with that? The Conservatives, when they have a candidate who is advocating a reinstitution of the death penalty and making Justin Trudeau subject to the death penalty, how do you react? Well, we learned how Mark Carney reacts. Mark Carney goes, well, this is a teachable moment, and we're going to keep him. And the Conservatives, conversely, say, hit the road, Jack. The Conservatives got it right, the Liberals got it wrong. So that's my first brick in the wall of why no one should be voting liberal. How Mark Carney dealt with the Paul Chang incident. I'm gonna just see. I got a lot being written. I'm gonna leave the chat alone. Seems to be a lot being written of on the chat. Max Power is saying that the existence of a bounty in of itself is foreign interference. No kidding. And Mark Carney, have we heard him issue, strong denouncements? Have we heard him taking action? He is the sitting prime minister. What type of action is he taking over a foreign country, putting a bounty on the head of a Canadian citizen? And why is this bounty in place? Because this Joe Tay advocates for free speech. He advocates for democracy. He advocates for the rule of law. Well, my question to Mark Carney is, why are you not taking action against China? Why are you not imposing trade restrictions on China? Why not take your laser beam focus off of the orange man in Washington and look at our real enemy that is putting a bounty on the head of Canadian citizens? And Joe Tay isn't the only Canadian citizen who has this bounty on his head. He's just somewhat prominent because he's running for the Conservatives in, I think it's Don Valley North. Mind-blowing. Max is saying that Carney has poor judgment and poor leadership. He doesn't lead. He wants to be a dictator. He just wants to be dropped in as Liberal leader, dropped into the role of prime minister. He's got a very friendly, compliant media that is going to promote him into the position of prime minister. And it's up to us as Canadians who have the eyes to see what is really going on to talk about it as much as possible. Cryptomir is saying that he's had a busy week and we ain't even made it to Thursday yet. Just reading up on the comments because I do like to keep up with the comments. Danny's saying that they have discovered a secret Chinese police station in Toronto. It was on Canadian mainstream media. Apparently, it's not the only one in Canada either. Would you share that with me? I've heard these stories as well, but I've never seen anything from what I would consider to be a reputable source. And when CBC covers something negative about the Liberals, it's true. I saw the stories on Paul Chang being, Rebel News, Western Standard, True North, Post Millennial. But when you see it in CBC, it's like, well, this is so big, not even our lying mainstream media can ignore it. So if you have something on that, fire it over to me in an email. I would appreciate it. Cryptomary is saying that the only party that's knocked on his door so far is the PPC, and even she is thinking about jumping the border. Let's see, Max is saying that classic Liberal response after a massive Liberal screw up, like wearing blackface or inviting a Nazi to Parliament. Yeah. Who's forgotten that? When the Liberal government brought in a Nazi who sat in the gallery and everyone gave that guy a Nazi a standing ovation. We've got such a wonderful country. Cryptomir is saying we can only do so much. My magic wand is in the shop next to my my crystal ball. Danny's writing that Carney is a fraud, that he loathes Canada and bends over for the WF. He's on the World Economic Forum Board of Directors. That tells you right there where Mark Carney's allegiances lie. It's on their website, for goodness sake. And if Mark Carney wants to refute that, well, come out and refute it. Say that the WAF website, their own official website, has me listed on the board of directors, and that is false. I want to hear him say that. Cryptomary says, I keep Jesus in my heart. I know if it's bad enough storm, I'll be blown to shore. Good way to look at things. In terms of the joking about the Conservative candidate who was joking about, I'm going to leave that aside because, and frankly, I share this view. That it is inappropriate. I don't think it is appropriate to advocate anything akin to violence, even jokingly. So I'm going to leave that aside. Um, Many will know that I've never been a fan of the FCK Trudeau or now Carney flags. I'm not a big fan of profanity. And I don't think you display it openly and publicly where kids are walking around. And I actually think it damages the conservative cause. Those flags, I don't think, help because there are individuals on the fence who, well, do I want to vote for Carney? Do I want to vote for Polyev? And then they see that flag and they go, I don't want to associate with people such as that who will display a flag full of profanity for my kids to see. My opinion. For what it's worth, I do agree that an individual should have the right to wave that flag. We live in a liberal democratic society after all, and we have this virtue of freedom of speech that I value. I do value freedom of speech, so I wouldn't take away the right of someone to wave that flag. But likewise, freedom of speech, I have the right to speak out and explain the reasons why I don't like the flag. And hopefully I convince a few people. I know I'll never convince all, but maybe even one or two. Cryptomeria writing, I really appreciate this. We are all from different theological backgrounds, but Jesus is king. Everyone, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Everything is just vanity. There's nothing new under the sun. 2,000 years ago, the religious leaders of Jesus' own day were arguing over who had the right doctrine. Is there resurrection? The Sadducees said, no, there's no resurrection. And to what degree, the Samaritans didn't follow the prophets. They only followed the books of Moses. Oh, they're wrong. They gotta have the prophets too. And there's always been division. And what do we have? Cryptomeria writes, I'm blonde. Can't say it's racist to say I'm dumb. No, I do dumb things all the time. Own it. That's funny. I used to be blonde, dirty blonde. Danny's writing, teachable moment. Carney must learn Canada does not need him. And Carney is hopefully going to be a flash in the pan. Hopefully, if he loses this election, let's pray. If Carney loses, he will be the shortest ever serving Prime Minister of Canada, replacing, I think the guy's name was Sir Charles Tupper, was Prime Minister for 40 days, 30, I forget how many days Tupper was. But if Carney loses, he will become the shortest ever serving Prime Minister of Canada. And let's hope that happens. Danny says that Rebel News covered Chinese police stations. I'm not a big fan of Rebel. I've met Ezra Levant. I've met David Menzies. Not a huge fan, but doesn't mean everything they report, doesn't mean their reporting is inaccurate. But Max Powers writing, also worth noting that China recently executed 4 Canadians. Elbow up doesn't apply to China for some reason. Well, this is going to get on to my further points about why people should, the talking points. So we have Paul Chang and Mark Carney refusing to remove a candidate who advocated that a Chinese citizen be a Canadian citizen be kidnapped. Mark Carney didn't think that was an offense worth being fired for. Well, elbows up doesn't apply to China for some reason. Why not? Is Mark Carney beholden to China? We'll bring this up as point number 2, his Chinese ties. When he was asset manager, when he was chairman of the board with Brookfield, Mark Carney helped to establish 2 green investment funds. And rather than having them headquartered in Canada, he had them set up in Bermuda to avoid Canadian taxation. He also arranged a $258 million. It's a $250 million loan, give or take $1 million here or there. $250 million loan from the Bank of China. And so the question we have to ask is, how beholden is Mark Carney to the Chinese? I think he is majorly beholden to the Chinese. That's why I don't think he was willing to fire Paul Chang. It's why I don't think he's talking about, retaliatory tariffs being brought in and trade war with China, because they're his masters. They are his masters. China is, and the interesting thing is, it's okay to be against the orange man in the United States, but I think there are a lot of brain dead liberal type people out there who think that if you criticize the nation state of China, that you're a racist, that that it's racism. And people are so afraid to be labeled a racist that, a foreign government can put bounties on our citizens, Canadian citizens, and we're guys like Mark Carney are afraid to take China to task. Why? Because you're afraid of being labeled a racist. Why are you having your company take out $250 million loans from the Bank of China? There are no banks in the Western world. How beholden is Mark Carney to China? That's something of an open question. I'm going to read the comments before I get on to point 3. Um, and as just a quick point as to those 4 Canadians, they were, I believe it was for drug related offenses. And I believe that at least our attorney general, our political system, our government spokespeople acknowledged that these Canadians were guilty of the crimes for which they were charged. That they went into a foreign country, engaged in illegal activity in that foreign country, and are subject to the laws of that. Pardon me, live and unscripted, sneezes and all, that they are subject to the laws of that foreign country. And I believe it was drug related. Cryptomir is writing, that's why he lives on an island. Richmond is China 2.0. But a lot of Canadians are of Hong Kong deprivation. They're either from Hong Kong themselves or their parents were, because Hong Kong, up until I think it was January 1st of the year 2000, Britain held a lease from mainland China on the island of Hong Kong. So it was British territory up until January 1, 2000, or midnight of, hate sneezing. Midnight, December 31st, 1999. That was the transfer point when it went from being a British holding to a Chinese holding. And a lot of Hong Kong Chinese, because ethnically they're the same, it's the same people, racially, ethnically, culturally, well, not culturally necessarily. Hong Kong was a bastion of free market capitalism. It was laissez-faire on steroids. Gambling was huge. Their stock market huge. Anyway, a lot of individuals from Hong Kong emigrated. They got out of Dodge. They had British passports. They were subjects of Britain, so they used those passports to come to countries like Canada and others, and England and Australia, because they were smart enough to recognize you don't want to live under a dictatorial communist system where, freedom of speech, forget it. Democracy, forget it. Rule of law, forget it. So they got out of Dodge. And China now does not like individuals like this Joe Tay advocate, and countless others, advocating for freedom, for democracy, for freedom of speech. They don't like Western democratic values being promoted in Hong Kong. It destabilizes their control. Let's see what's being written. Eat Me has shown up. Thanks, Eat Me. Good to see you here. Saying good evening to everyone. Danny doesn't like the F Trudeau, F Carney flags either, although he agreed. I have no issue with the sentiment, but And so often it's about how you express things, and I think those flags waving around, F Trudeau, F Carney, I think they actually push people to vote for the Liberals in Carney. You know, they get a raw response from people who were never going to vote Liberal anyway, so you've accomplished nothing, and you've probably taken a few people who were on the fence. Well, should I vote Liberal or Conservative? I can't decide. I don't want to associate with those F Carney type people. I'll vote for them. They're not a good look. Got everyone saying hi, bonsoir. Just reading. Cryptomeria, talking about BC, where the premier is Eby. Eby didn't pull Chinese alcohol, but will have worse tariffs in BC. Yeah, the Chinese have imposed crushing tariffs on Canadian seafood, which is really going to hammer the BC fishery. But Eby's not pulling their booze off the shelf or anything like that, or closing, imports to Chinese goods. There are so many Chinese grocery stores and such that people frequent. To which country do your allegiances truly lie? Well, it's okay to to go, all elbows up against the big evil orange man, but don't make China mad. That's annoying. Max Powers writing that it's actually racist to ignore Chinese threats on Canadian citizens like Liberals do, because many of them are Chinese who have family members threatened by the CCP. And this is the point. Joe Tay has family in Hong Kong. So does Paul Chang. Paul Chang has family in Hong Kong. And I have to wonder, is his family under threat? Is he owned by the Chinese? Maybe, they're threatening his family. I don't know. This is a dictatorial communist system that they have over there. The rule of law, the law is what they say the law is. It's ruled by dictate. Things are, we don't know how lucky we are to be living in a constitutional country, a country that follows the rule of law, a country, I almost said constitutional republic, we're a constitutional parliamentarian democracy. But either way, that constitution is so important, and it's rooted in Judeo-Christian values. And now we are being conditioned, taught, programmed, propagandized into thinking that everything about our Judeo-Christian roots that have given us such a wonderful country, that it's evil and wrong and bad. And why are they doing that? Why are they pulling up that anchor? Because that's the way they can install a more communist, dictatorial style of governance onto Canadians. And that is simply reality. Eaton's writing, when the mainstream starts turning against the carbon king, it is telling that they too are human, and the carbon zero policy will hurt them all. Well, we'll get on to, so I've got 2 points so far, 2 planks, 2 bricks in the wall of why we need to get rid of Mark Carney. Number one is his refusal to kick out an MP who advocated the kidnapping of a Canadian citizen and handing them over to the Chinese for a bounty of $184,000. The second is Carney's actions when he was the chairman of the board at Brookfield Asset Management, taking out loans for 250 million plus, $250 million from the Chinese. How beholden is Mark Carney to China? And then let's talk about this carbon tax. Gasoline prices in my area of Ontario were in and around $1.50. Now they've fallen to about $1.30 or so, depending upon where you are. So there's been a big, 15 to 20 cent drop in the price of gas. And why did that happen? The reason that happened is because Pierre Poilievre and the Conservative Party of Canada made carbon taxation a major issue of this campaign. Even before the election had started, Pierre Poilievre was saying this election is about axing the carbon tax. We're going to get rid of it. We're going to get rid of putting a price on carbon and impoverishing Canadians so that they're freezing in the dark. And he hammered that, and he did such a good job that it forced, when Mark Carney became leader, he wanted to take a bullet out of the gun, so to speak, that was going to be used against him. He wanted to take away the ammunition of the Conservatives. So what he did is he unilaterally lowered the carbon tax down to 0%, while at the same time promising that if actually elected to government, that he will then replace the old carbon tax with a new carbon tax. The old carbon tax was paid for by consumers. It was added to the price at the gasoline pump. We were paying it. Now he's going to have a new system if he gets elected, where he'll hit the oil and gas companies directly and other companies. He'll put the onus on them. They will have to pay the carbon tax, and then they will build it into the price, and we'll end up paying more again. So this reprieve on carbon taxation that has lowered gas prices from $1.50 in my area, from $1.50 down to $1.30. And remember, Ontario is the battleground. Ontario is going to determine who the governing party is. Are enough people in Ontario going to fall for this bait and switch, which is what it is? The bait is here. We're going to, you can save 15, 20 cents a liter on gas. So please vote for us so that if we get reelected, we can put even more taxes on things like gasoline. But instead of having you pay it directly, it will be built into the price. So the gas will go from $1.50 down to $1.30, and then after the Liberals get elected, go to $1.60, $1.70. And and this notion of carbon taxation, like a country of 40 million people, like we're going to save the planet from climate change. Give me a break. We're 40 million people. We are the second largest land mass on the planet. We're about half the size, roughly half the size of Russia. But Russia, right, has around 140, 150 million people. They've got 100 million more people than we do. How much can we impact? We're not that much bigger than China. We're 9.8 thousand square kilometers in size, and China's 9.7. We're about the same size as China, but they've got 35 times our population. So this whole carbon thing, this notion that we're going to save the planet, has always been a ridiculous notion. Why are we impoverishing ourselves? So there's 3 reasons not to vote for Mark Carney. And we'll keep going. Cryptomeria says that most of his friends are Hong Kong Chinese. Hong Kong, they speak what is it? Cantonese, and mainland China, Beijing, it's Mandarin, but there are countless other dialects. There's Hakka, there's so many different dialects of Chinese. Danny says he's not racist, just an equal opportunity hater. Ha ha ha. Just hate everyone equally. No. Not sure what Cryptomeria that is in reference to, what night that's in reference to, but Danny's saying that some folks say a vote for Carney is a vote for Trump. Your thoughts? Well, I do have a thought on the fact that Trump and Carney appear very much aligned. And some might, well, what are you talking about? Carney's nothing like Trump. Well, wait a minute. During the 2016 presidential election, when Donald Trump was running against Mark Carney, or against Mark Carney, against Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton running against Donald Trump. And Hillary Clinton and Dave Chappelle did a great comedy routine on this. She hit him with taxes. You don't pay your taxes. You're a tax avoider, Donald Trump. And what did Trump say? That's because I'm smart. I'm playing the system. Now, Mark Carney has been accused of avoiding taxes for his Brookfield properties by having them established in tax-free havens like Bermuda. And apologists for Mark Carney are going, that's because he's smart. He's like Trump. Mark Carney's like Trump. He knows how to play the system. He's a smart guy. Now, as for people saying that a vote for Carney is a vote for Trump, The biggest fear that I have is beyond Canada and well, it's beyond Canada. My biggest fear is the coming war, for lack of a better word, but it is a war. There's a major confrontation coming between China and the United States. I've been talking about it on my station for more than a year now. That the U.S. is top dog. They're the number one economy, the number one military power in the world right now. But the China is coming up hard and fast. It's long been speculated that sometime between 2030 and 2035, there's that year, 2030, sometime between 2030 and 2035, that the Chinese would surpass the Americans in terms of having the world's largest economy. And what we are seeing right now is, in a fashion, it's just a continuation of what is often referred to as the Great Game, something that has been going on for centuries. There was the silk trade, there was the spice trade, there was you know, the Chinese road, Marco Polo. We've establishing trade routes for vital commodities has been pretty much all of human recorded history. And now the commodities, it's not silk, it's not spices. Now it's rare earths, minerals, lithium, uranium, uh, stuff for military. And China and the United States are in competition for these rare earths, these minerals, these vital components of the arms industry, high grade nickel. And where is Canada as a minor player? Under whose umbrella are we going to fall? We are going to fall under the umbrella of one of the Americans or the Chinese. It's got to be one of the two. It's like gender, it's a binary choice, male, female, China, US. Which umbrella do you want to fall under? And I am decidedly here to say I want to be under the umbrella of the United States, warts and all. As flawed a nation as the United States is, I would rather be under their umbrella than under the umbrella of communist dictatorial China. So I don't know if that works into one of my bullet points, but I think the likes of Carney want to push Canada more into a dependency, more into a relationship, more into the sphere of the Chinese. And I think Donald Trump in the United States, you can argue about, is he doing it well or is he doing it poorly? But Donald Trump recognizes that for the United States to maintain its preeminence in the world as the world's number one economic and militaristic superpower, if the Americans want to maintain that position, they have to secure vitally important resources like high grade nickel, uranium, cobalt, lithium, and rare earths and minerals. These things are vitally important to the United States. And their country, as big as it is, doesn't have an abundance of some of them. Some of the things they have to go outside for. And China recognizes it too, as large as it is. It needs to, this Belt Road initiative that they have. They've been going into Africa, huge, signing up resource deals to lock up these rare earths and minerals and uranium and things that they need to grow their economy and their military. And we're coming to a head. It's not tomorrow, it's not next week, it's not a month or two from now, but in the years ahead. So there's my thoughts on a vote for Carney as a vote for Trump. I don't think so. Danny's writing that you can't find any bourbon in Quebec. And so he's thinking about going down to the United States. Like Kentucky is a state famous for bourbon. And this annoys me that they've unilaterally taken the choice away from consumers. If a Canadian consumer, whether because of propaganda or whatever, if they do not want to buy Kentucky bourbon or US booze, no problem. Okay, don't buy it. But leave it on the shelf. Leave it on the shelf and put a tariff on it to encourage Canadians to switch from bourbon to Canadian rye whiskey. Whatever. Put a tariff on it, but leave it on the shelf. We're a free and democratic society, or we're supposed to be. And now we have Big Brother telling you, we don't want you to drink American booze. And we're going to go a step further and make sure you can't buy American booze. I believe in free choice. So some people like the government stepping in and dictating. I mean, there is, at times like this, people gravitate toward dictatorial style rule. We saw that during the COVID era. What did we see during the COVID era? People advocated my body, my choice. No, not anymore. The government owns your body. I got it, so you got to get it too. No more my body, my choice. Man, there's a lot being written. Let's see what's being written. Danny, if people think that a vote for Carney is a vote for the orange bad man, let them think that way. That's fair enough. That's fair enough. It's a complicated issue, and the media tends to boil it down into very simple. That the CBCs of the world, they want to make everything so brain dead simple that a 6-year-old, like a kid in kindergarten, can understand it. And the world is a lot more complicated than that. Mark Carney is a more complicated individual than, what just scratches the surface. I believe he's heavily beholden to the Chinese, and that he's pushing us into that sphere of influence. And I think China is just, loving what's going on in this country, because we're so mad at our, we've been whipped into a hysterical frenzy because of Donald Trump, that we're moving away from the American sphere, and we're being sucked into the Chinese sphere, and that's problematic, more than problematic. He's saying that Danny should take a road trip to the Reserve, Kananakwe. They have a liquor store, probably has some U.S. booze on the shelves. Miss my Jim Beam. I'm not a drinker myself. The last time I had a drink was on St. Patrick's Day. I finished off the little bit of rye whiskey I left in my Crown Royal bottle. Max is writing, Polyev already had the consumer carbon tax reduced to 0, and he's not even the prime minister yet. No kidding. Canadians should thank Pierre Poilievre for the fact that gas prices have gone down significantly in this country. I know it's not universal. I'd like to hear. I don't see whale oil beef here, but someone did they go down, Danny and Eat Me in Montreal? I know they've gone down in Ontario, but I don't know about BC. I don't know about Quebec. It's EB. And Danny saying no price drop so that stinks. But it depends whether provinces already had carbon taxation of their own. If they did, then they were exempt from the federal carbon tax. Ontario didn't have an Ontario carbon tax. So Justin Trudeau, with Mark Carney, advising him, imposed it on us. And he's going to reimpose it. And Amy saying that gas jumped 25 cents in the last few weeks here in Montreal. Wow. Gas prices in Quebec are absolutely insane. And Jenny misses Jim Beam, Wild Turkey, and I don't know Evan Williams. I know Jim Beam. I know Wild Turkey. I used to like Hank Williams Jr. He had a song. I have known some ladies, and I have known Jim Beam, and both of them tried to kill me back in 1973. Cryptomiri says that gas did go down in Victoria from down to $1.60 from $1.99. Wow, it's insane. And Cryptomiri is saying that on the island everything costs more. Danny's writing that he lived briefly in Victoria, Oak Bay Road, and worked on the Old England Inn in Esquimalt. Victoria is for the newlywed, not for the newly dead. Ha 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 ha. Esquimalt, that's where the big naval, Canada's big naval base is for our frigates. Forget battleships, forget aircraft carriers. Our big ships are frigate class. And Brett down in Wyoming is mentioning that it snowed down in his area. And me saying, well, we didn't get the ice rain here today, got lucky. Things today, beautiful day in Toronto area or Ontario. I'm an hour and a half east, so I'm 150 kilometers away, but it was 9-10 degrees. I'm sure it was warm in Toronto too. Eat Me's asking everyone to give me a thumbs up. Yep, please do. Oh, Danny, oh yeah, the SAC, Société de Alcool de Quebec. You know, it's so funny. Quebec's funny. You got SAC, SAQ, Society Alcohol Quebec, and then you have SALQ, which is SAAQ, which is the insurance, Society des Assurances and de Quebec. So you got SAC, both government agencies. And for Americans, I mean, in Ontario, in Quebec, most of the booze you buy when you want to buy Jim Beam, Wild Turkey, when you want to buy vodka, rye, rum, tequila, whatever, booze, when you want to buy hard liquor, you have to go into a liquor store that is owned by the government. In both Ontario and Quebec now, if you want to buy wine and beer, well, that you can get in a convenience store at a gas station. Ontario only just brought that out within the last few years. It used to be that even wine and beer you couldn't buy in a convenience store. And what's Danny writing his last one? Brett's asking us all to keep the good fight. So let's I got to get through my list. I said I was going to give 7 points, and I've only given 3 really. Paul Chang, you know, Mark Carney refused to kick him out of the party, even after advocating that a Canadian citizen be kidnapped and taken to a foreign government, to the Chinese consulate. That's 1. 2, Mark Carney's beholden to China. Look at the $250 million loan, $250 million loan that Brookfield took out under Mark Carney's leadership. How beholden is he to the communist Chinese? 3, the carbon tax. We're seeing what it's like to, you know, the price of gas without carbon taxation. If we want to keep that, we need to vote in the Conservatives, not the Liberals. So let's go number 4. Ghislaine Maxwell. Do we really want a prime minister in this country who likes to rub elbows with the Ghislaine Maxwells of the world, you know, rubbing elbows while he's sitting at Wimbledon, drinking his champagne, eating his strawberries, and chumming around with Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein's, you know, partner in crime, who's now, I don't know how long her prison term is. It should be life. So there's 4. Let's see, what else have I got on the list? Mark Carney moved Canadian jobs from Brookfield Asset Management's headquarters. He had the headquarters moved from Toronto to New York City. He signed a letter to shareholders. The board of directors, under his leadership, advocated that these high-paying Canadian jobs be moved to New York City, and the board accepted Mark Carney's suggestion. They voted in favor of it. Then Mark Carney sent out a letter to shareholders asking them to endorse his move to take these high-paying Canadian jobs down to the U.S. And the decision was approved by shareholders. They listened to Mark Carney. They read his letter and they said, "Yeah, we think you're on the money, Mark. We don't want high-paying jobs in Canada. Let's move them to the U.S." Then the jobs were moved. The headquarters moved from Toronto to New York. But that happened after Mark Carney vacated the position. And then Mark Carney lied to Canadians and tried to tell us that, well, that decision was made after I left. No, the decision to move the head office was made by you while you were chairman of the board. You recommended it in a signed letter to shareholders, but the actual move didn't take place until you had moved. It's like saying, I mean, it's just so playing fast and loose, and to think that he could pull the wool over Canadian eyes by saying, well, that happened after I left. No, it was you own it, Mark. Own it. That's simple. Just own it. Yeah, okay. You know, it was me, but he's a weasel. So there's another reason not to vote for him. Bill 69. There's something that just came out. Bill 69 is a bill brought in by the Trudeau Liberals that is designed to keep Canadian LNG and our oil, to keep our resources in the ground. Right now, there are countries like Korea or Japan that want Canadian LNG, liquefied natural gas, for hydroelectric generation. They're burning coal, and coal is horrible. It's polluting. I mean, whether it does anything to the climate or not, who cares? Coal blackens the sky. It's a pollutant. It's a carcinogen. Ask Nova Scotia, Cape Breton coal miners about coal dust. They're burning coal in countries like Japan and Korea because they need to generate electricity, and they've asked for, send us your LNG. It's cleaner than burning coal. Bill C-69 is designed to keep Canadian LNG in the ground. And Mark Carney has just recently came out, said that he supports continuing to have Bill C-69 on the books so that our wealth, our resources, our prosperity, we're not allowed. Let them burn coal. Marie Antoinette said, let them eat cake. Mark Carney looks at other countries in the world and says, why give them clean Canadian LNG? Let them burn coal. That's a huge one. So that's 6. So I just need one more to fill out my 7 and end the video. And the last one I'm going to say is disclosure. Mark Carney won't, like Donald Trump, won't disclose his assets. He keeps things as close as he can. He's not going to tell you what's in my stock portfolio. Not going to tell you how much I have in that green energy fund that owes $250 billion or $250 million to China. I'm not going to tell you. It's none of your business. I'm gaming the system. I'm smart like Donald Trump. He won't disclose his assets. He's not required to. He's not required. It's the ethical thing to do. But Mark Carney is not an ethical individual. And we know this already. He chums around with Ghislaine Maxwell. He refuses to remove a Liberal candidate who advocates kidnapping a Canadian citizen. He lies about sending Canadian jobs down to the US. And he refuses to disclose his assets because I don't have to. I'm playing by the rules like Donald Trump. I'm gaming the system. I'm smart. Are you going to vote for him? And these are the points you need to, when we're talking, forget the news. They're not going to cover this. They're not going to loop it. They're not going to have expert commentary come on and tell Canadians that Mark Carney is unethical. They're not going to do that. So you have to do it. I have to do it. We have to have conversations, casual conversations. What do you think about Mark Carney and all those pictures of him with Ghislaine Maxwell? What do you think? What do you think about Mark Carney's moving Brookfield's head office from Toronto to New York? What do you think about that? What do you think about, this Liberal candidate who wanted to kidnap a Canadian citizen and hand him over to the Chinese for a bounty? And Mark Carney thought that, the guy should stay as a candidate. What do you think about that? What do you think about the fact that Mark Carney is gaming the system the same way Donald Trump does to avoid, to lower his tax burden? What do you think? What do you think about the fact that he won't disclose his financial assets? What do you think? And have them all ready. And because the night we knew, if you don't want Mark Carney to be prime minister of this country, you cannot rely on reporting from the CBC, CTVs, and Globals. They're not going to do it for us. We have to have these conversations. I'm having them every single day, but I have to have them with everyone. I can't just have them with like-minded friends and people that I know. There's a girl I work with, Jamie. No point in having a conversation with her because she hates Mark Carney and she hates Justin Trudeau. So I'm I'm accomplishing nothing with her. It's a case of, it's like Christians love going to church and being surrounded by like-minded individuals. But I have so much respect for those guys who go out onto a street corner and are willing to face hostility and are willing to, evangelize. And the same type of mentality is needed if we're going to take, if Mark Carney ends up winning, look in the mirror. Look in the mirror. How many people did you convince? Anyone? Get people out to the polls on March 28th. If you manage to convince someone, they go, yeah, you sound like, you sound on the money. Yeah, I think the Conservatives would be better. Great. Where's your polling station? Are you going to vote now? Then call them on voting day and say, did you vote? Well, no, I didn't have time. Well, here, I'll pick you up and I'll take you to the polling station. So let's see what's being written. So getting back, yeah, there, the SOC, getting back to La Belle Province de Quebec, where you have the SOC, Société Alcool de Québec, where you booze, then Société de Assurance Automobile Québec, that's a SAL. They actually do pronounce it differently. One is SAC and one is SAL. It's weird. Danny's saying that Ghislaine Maxwell, Mark Carney, the woman he likes to chum around with, that she got 20 years. Should be life. Max is writing that still waiting for the Epstein list to be revealed. We're going to be waiting until the cows come home. They're never going to fully release that. Benny Wirt's a name I haven't seen before. Good line. Liberal voters are elbows up and pants down like confused clowns. Great line. I like that. I may use it. Max Power likes the list. And he'll add that Mark Carney supports the CBDC, central bank digital currency. And the biggest problem is, with this little list that I have, and I can't remember all the points on it, although I did write them down and write down every one. The biggest problem with it is that how much literacy does someone have about things like CBDC? We have people right now who are happy to use their cell phone, Apple Pay or whatever. I don't own a cell phone. They're happy to use Apple Pay. And they're used to, this idea of virtual currency and virtual money. And there's there's a tendency by a lot of people who are, well, it's convenient. Well, it's convenient. And maybe they're tracking me all the time. Maybe they know every dime that I spend, but it's convenient. We'll sell our soul for convenience in this country. And then Danny, exactly, with respect to the Epstein list, if it ever does come out, it'll be redacted, blacked out. There are too many powerful names on that list. Eamy's writing that Brookfield seems to have a deal with Qatar when it comes to LNG, liquefied natural gas. Yeah, if they took our LNG, it would be bad for Brookfield. Brookfield has advocated for pipelines and things like that in other countries, just not in Canada. We want to impoverish Canadians. We don't want to unleash this incredible wealth that Canada has and improve this, quality of life for Canadians. No, not if you're Mark Carney. You want, and it is part of a WEF globalist agenda to make life, to take the standard of living in the Western world and to take it down. That is the ultimate goal. What is Benny Wirtz writing? Liberal voters were abused as Well, you have to wonder sometimes. I mean, we've been hammered with carbon taxation for years now, thanks to Trudeau and his buddy Carney, hammering us with taxation. And Pierre Poilievre made it a big issue. We're going to axe the tax. And it's like, an abusive husband beating up his wife, and a guy comes along and says, "Hey, you're going to stop beating your wife." And Holton stops him. And then what does the wife say? And this is sadly true. "Well, he's not beating me up anymore. I guess I'll stay with him." Well, he took the carbon tax off for now. I'll stay with the Liberal Party under Carney. And sadly, it's a reality of the way that people operate in abusive relationships. There's a tendency to gravitate back toward the abuser. Hopefully, we're smarter than that in this coming election. See what Danny is writing. CBDCs will also have funds that expire if not used in time, they just disappear. We already saw what happened during the trucker convoy. I think everyone here is like me, fully supportive. God bless the truckers. But even if people are not, even for those who like, "Oh my gosh, it's an illegal occupation, honk honk, they're terrifying me." Well, regardless of where you stood on supporting or not supporting the truckers, the fact that the government can reach in and freeze people's bank accounts should scare the living crap out of you. If you believe in democracy, if you want to live in a dictatorship, well, then be thrilled. Oh, good. The government can go in and freeze a bank account. Anyway, I'm going to wrap up now. I've gone on for over an hour long. And I don't think my video was too glitchy for a change, thankfully. Middle of the week, later in the evening, probably not as many people in my little rural area on the internet. But I'll end the video the way I always do. May the Lord bless and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and lift up his countenance upon you. May the Lord be gracious to you, and may he grant you peace. And as crazy as, even if Mark Carney wins, Jesus is king. If Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives win, Jesus is king. Whether times are good, whether times are bad, I will praise him. We are in for trial, no matter what happens. This world is heading in the direction that it is heading, but there's someone who's in charge. And I invite you to get into relationship with him. I'm planning to do a video talking more about The Chosen. And the more I watch it, the more I like it, the more I see it as an outstanding vehicle to bring people in a dark world and give them some exposure to the light that is Jesus Christ. And then at that point, they can decide themselves whether they want to dive in deeper or not. Do they want to just enjoy it as a dramatic soap opera style historical streaming show, or do they want to get into the weeds and dive in and pull out a Bible and read? I'm hoping for the latter. I pray that The Chosen leads people into a deeper relationship, into exploring Christianity. But you got to put that lamp out there. So we'll end off there, and we'll talk to y'all in a few nights. Oh my gosh, I missed a lot of messages, but doesn't seem like Max brings up one, the online harms bill, which thankfully, from what I understand, has been broken into two parts. So there's one about exploiting children. Okay, fair enough. And this other part has been set aside, where they impanel an unelected body to determine that people can make complaints to. That's a video. That's a whole nother subject for a whole nother video. This online harms bill. I'm gonna leave it there. What are we? April 2nd now. We survived April 1st. We'll see what tomorrow brings. I'll have more content coming out. Some of it pre-recorded, some of it live. I'm going to be mixing it up. So like, share, subscribe. You know the drill. And we'll talk to y'all later. Thanks, everyone. God bless. And I'll give Danny the last word. Amen, amen, and amen. Good night, y'all. Bonne nuit, me. And road trip for smoke sounds good. God bless. Good night, all.